Oh, Ronnie's here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, just got a bit of noise pollution there.
So we do have some contributions from the audience which we're going to address, but Jeremy first. Yeah, are you talking about sanctuaries, I think?
Well, yeah, and I just on the efficiency point real quickly, it's interesting to me because I think most forms of activism have a catalyst, the content, and then the carryway, takeaway that you give to the person receiving the content. So yeah, when you contrast, and I think it's helpful to do this for all of our forms of activism, is because there's also direct versus indirect. On the street, you have loads of people passing that might be influenced, and depending where someone's at, that could actually be more influential than having a conversation, I suppose it's possible. Likewise, school talks, record, share on social media, and also have that indirect, after effect too. I know for
might
me,
even affect the teachers in the room as well, not just the students.
Point, yeah, and then they go on to influence others, obviously, and as all of us can, I guess. Because I know I've graduated more towards the social media side of things, and specifically by supporting the local sanctuary. I've helped a number of sanctuaries over the years, but my local now is Friend Farm Animal Sanctuary. And if anybody is near London, I highly encourage you to check it out. Obviously, it's a bit of a tricky time at the moment, but if you keep your eye on the page, you can see what they're doing out there. And for me, it's just, selfishly, it's great self-care because, I get out in nature, I get to spend time. I think as animal advocates, we oftentimes don't get to interact with other animals in any concrete way. If we do, it's possibly, over social media, and it may be more of the graphic stuff, not just seeing them as who they are as unique individuals, which to me is really the case for building rights, is just that individual unique personalities and those experiences that are those interests that are protected by their rights. So I found it quite effective though from an outreach perspective too, because through short videos I think we can quickly highlight their personalities, and that way, because it's not practicable for everyone to get to a sanctuary, especially now, but by sharing content on social media, I know that's what affected me the most. We talked about some of our main catalysts. I did the vegetarian thing, but when I was there, what nudged me to live vegan was seeing a separation of a mother from her son, for her to be used for her milk, and it wasn't graphic at all. And that's what I try to do through my videos, is really try to, because I think we perhaps overly focus on logic as a movement, and I think there's a huge emotional component to our ethical decision making that is often kind of swept to the side. And there's a great Reagan quote, that philosophy can lead you to think, basically, but emotion helps you drink it. That's paraphrasing, but that really rings true with me in my experiences, and that's why I gravitate towards sanctuaries. Plus, if you look at, we can start talking about subsidies and the rest of it, but I think to me that's directly saving an animal when they're at sanctuary, because all those animals who are at sanctuary wouldn't exist, they would be killed otherwise. So that's a very fulfilling from that perspective too. So I could talk about sanctuaries all day though. Turkeys falling asleep on one's lap, cows, nestling into you, and the rest of it. But Wendy, you started doing a podcast a while back, I believe. Have you and even had some recent guests who are joining us now?
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things actually you were saying there, Jeremy, because I think you're so right in when you go to the sanctuaries, it's just so magical. It's a real magical experience to be around these individuals that you wouldn't perhaps normally get to meet in kind of ordinary life. It's a very different context that you're seeing them to what you would expect and what the public would expect. It's really magical, and I think it's real nourishment for your soul. And like you said, being out in fresh air, the physical work that you get to do, often shoveling shit, is heads up there, is really great. It's great to be out in nature and physical work, and it's really great for your own health and well-being, as well as obviously meeting individuals. That's something that I now intend to do much more consistently and regularly as part of my work as well. But coming back to something, because I'm going to talk about the podcast for a second, but something, the point that Roger and Tom were talking about earlier about that feeling pressured maybe to do the street stuff, the street outreach demos and protests. I think that's quite a good point, because over the years I've been involved in so many different forms of activism. So the stalls that I was talking about earlier, marches, sit-ins, die-ins. We even used to do die-ins dressed in costumes outside the Home Office, things like that. Demos outside fur shops and cosmetic shops, things like this. Vegan outreach, live export demos, leaflet drops, volunteering, rescues, things like that. And I've tried so many things, and it always comes back to me. And something that Brad mentioned as well, am I being efficient? Is this the best use of my time? And I think you can get sort of pressured, or not so much pressured, but almost think that this is the way it's done. This is the activism I have to do, otherwise I'm not really an activist. And I know that I've had this real battle over the last couple of years, in that I feel I'm trying to reassess, like, where is the best place to use my time and my resources and my capacity. And as part of my work as a coach, life and business coach, I was actually doing live interviews with entrepreneurs. And I found that I really, really loved it. I loved asking questions. I loved hearing people's stories and their experiences. And it just started to, there was a kind of seed planted in that I kind of was aware of podcasts. And I thought, well, maybe one day I could do a podcast. And then when I was reassessing my whole activism, I just suddenly thought, why can't I do a vegan podcast? So I just decided there and then, okay, I'm going to do it. I had no idea how that looked or what was going to happen, or had any kind of experience of actually setting up a podcast, but I just decided that was it. This was where I did have some kind of maybe affinity with speaking to people, so I just decided to do it. So I set up Thrive Vegan World with the view to kind of speaking to inspiring vegans and activists in and looking at how we thrive as individuals as vegans, how we support each other as a community, and also how we build a strong movement for the rights of our fellow animals, really. And I know that a couple of you on here have already been guests. I know actually 3 of you have already been my guests. Thank you. Hi, Ronnie. Ronnie's just came out, part 2 of Ronnie's was just out last week. I'm about to publish my next one today. But going back to the thing of being pressured to do the activism that you see out there, I think for me, what I'm realizing more and more, it's about finding things that you're aligned with, things that suit you, things that you enjoy, things that you're good at. So it's about looking at your own skill set, looking at your own passions, what you're passionate about, what do you love to do, what are you good at, what's your skill set, how can you apply that into activism, where can you put that into advocating for our fellow animals. Another thing I love to do is write. So at the moment that's being expressed through social media posts, but I'm looking to further that and build my website and put blogs out there. So it's just, again, finding your own affinities and your own capacities, really. And if you're a quiet vegan, you know, like we were saying earlier, that every day there's probably an opportunity, even when people ask you about your dietary choices, you know, in this market. Or yesterday a woman came to my door. She was one of these people trying to get you to sign up for charities. It was a children's charity, and she noticed that I had a big cat tower in my house, and we started talking about cats. She'd rescued a cat, her cat had kittens, and I was saying you didn't get them neutered. It started a whole conversation and went into veganism, and she was asking me so many questions. We had a great conversation just on the doorstep. And it just highlights, again, as some of the others have said, like every day there are opportunities just to even speak to people in your world, your friends and family. Sometimes they're the harder people, to be fair, but even people you come across in the restaurants or at the supermarket, check out, you know, like Roger did with the milk. It's just looking for those opportunities and always having that awareness that, and it's about being non-confrontational as well. It's not about going, yeah, you're all wrong, and you should be ashamed of yourselves for living as you are, and I've seen the light, and being self-righteous. It's just about being open and non-confrontational and ready to have like a good conversation with someone. So yeah, and something I know Ronnie's very spoken to me about on the podcast and on the show as well is, even if the one thing you could do is, if you're quiet and you don't feel like talking, is you can deliver leaflets. I've done lots of leaflet drops. You can do that with a friend. You know, you can literally alternate doors up one side of the street or take opposite sides of the street. And it sounds really simple, but it's something that you can do if you don't feel inclined to speak to people. Can you write letters to your MPs? Can you get involved with your local councillor in what's going on with issues around other animals there? You know, there's so many different ways. It doesn't have to be out on the street, because some people are not drawn to that and they might find that quite scary and quite overwhelming. But there's so many different ways, things in the background of different organisations, admin work, you know. So I just would love to speak to those people who feel that they're not aligned with the what they see as activism. There may be other ways to do it.
Vegan? No. No, I don't.
No, I don't know what. Yeah, I am. No, I don't.
So what's a vegan?
Somebody who doesn't eat dairy, things, or any animal products.
Somebody who does not eat any dairy products, animal products, or use any animal products at all.
No, over another.
But wool.
See, wool might be different because you can take the wool without actually killing the sheep.
Do you think a vegan would wear wool?
I think they would personally. I think they would.
I think if the wool came from an ethical source, they probably
And if the
would.
sheep was happy about it, maybe.
Like fair trade wool.
Yeah, exactly. Or
When they should
Happy
volunteer.
sheep.
yeah, exactly.
Happy sheep, maybe, you know.
Happy sheep. Yeah, right. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
A vegan is someone that does not use, eat, or wear anything that is derived from any sort of animal.
Yeah.
Vegan, vegano. Yeah, vegan. Vegano.
Oh.
Is it a woman?
The term vegan originated in the 1940s, and it's connected with an English person by the name of Donald Watson. And from the very beginning, what was the core of veganism? It was a decision not to participate in the exploitation of others. That's what it means to be vegan ultimately. In its historical, proper sense, it means I am not going to participate in the exploitation of others to the extent I am capable of.
Hey, Yoslings. Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another vegan time tunnel. So we're creating an archive, which is all going to be in one place at eventually, which it's there now, really, but we're building on it. Thanks so much for everybody who tuned into the special last week, which was about the 1989 animal rights debate, which has been rediscovered in full. That was a good session, and if you haven't seen that one, it'd be worth looking at the recording because it's a really quite interesting kind of document in the sense that it was quite a formal debate. It wasn't exactly kind of Oxford or Cambridge, but it was a formal debate which you don't tend to see nowadays. So it is quite interesting. Right, in terms of today, then I've entitled this, When Did the Vegan Movement Stop Being Terrified of the Word Vegan? Which sounds a little bit odd, but we're going to kind of explore this idea of the move towards the acceptance of the word within the vegan movement, which again sounds a bit strange, but we'll see how that pans out in the coming minutes. The timeline, we're going to enter our tunnel in 1990 and come out, in actual fact, in the present day. So it's a long time tunnel in that sense. Now, generally speaking, we live in a time when many people, many activists would say that the moral baseline of the animal liberation movement is veganism. We might simply say that veganism is our movement's moral baseline. We might say that it's central to everything that we do as a movement, and we might say it's pretty much central to everything that we say as a movement. Didn't used to be like that, of course, but this is what the time tunnel is about, in a sense. So in terms of the word vegan, we're used to seeing it virtually everywhere now. It's on the web, it's on websites, we see it on street billboards, we see it on restaurants and cafe menus, and we see it in supermarkets. So the word vegan seems to be everywhere now. And as I said, it wasn't always like this. In fact, there are some modern day animal activists who claim that veganism should not be the moral baseline of our movement, but activism should be. So some have argued that we should decenter the word vegan within the vegan movement, or actually refrain from using it at all. A prominent activist group a few years ago called for a boycott of the word. So this time tunnel is slightly different from that, in the sense that it's about a related issue which is slightly different, which is, when did the movement stop being frightened of the word? But it's also got another couple of kind of sub questions, which are, is it fully not frightened of the word now, which is quite interesting? And also, is it true that there seems to be some resistance or some wariness of presenting in the vegan movement a consistent vegan message? So that's our kind of menu, if you like, for today. And so that's, in fact, is our time tunnel. Yeah, so I remember to do the title. So I just want to make a clarification at the start here, which is that this time tunnel is not designed to be an attack on any individual or any group. The idea is for it to be descriptive of the changes that have occurred over the years in terms of, you know, what we now recognize as the vegan movement and what we now recognize as the claims that the vegan movement makes, essentially. Because it's not that long ago when the animal movement would say virtually anything other than the word vegan. And so the question is why? And that's because until very recently, a lot of professionals and writers and strategists in the movement, they all claimed that veganism was a scare word, which was sometimes best avoided and certainly for most downplayed. And so that was the situation until relatively recently in the movement. One strategist, for example, argued that, well, in perhaps another 20 years or so, it might be safe to use the word vegan, but not now. For now, he said, we should recognize that we're in a pre-vegan world and act accordingly. Now, of course, from my point of view, and looking at the history of the vegan social movement, this flies in the face of Donald Watson's idea, which he presented in his very first bulletin for the movement in November 1944, that we need to ripen people up to new ideas. You know, they're not going to just kind of fall over them we've got to present new ideas. So the more we avoid using the word that we want to, that's a bad thing from Watson's point of view. For some strategies, it's a good thing, but we'll see. Even the groups of the 1990s who used the word vegan in their organizations' names, they came to regret it. So an example of that is Vegan Outreach. Vegan Outreach came into being in 1990, and it was called Animal Liberation Action at the time. And they came to specialize in giving pamphlets out to college and university students in the main. Around 1994, they had a pamphlet entitled Vegetarianism. And then not long after that, they had another one called Justice for All, which I found an intriguing title, because I don't know whether that was, as it were, an intersectional message. I've never seen that pamphlet. So if anybody got one, I'd love to see that. So the Justice for All pamphlet, this did talk about veganism for the first time, but it presented veganism as a diet. What we'll see in the coming while is the fact that this is a repeated thing, that when the groups and the movement started to accept the word and started to use the word, it was almost exclusively presented as a diet at first. And there's still a lot of that going on. So that's a problem in my eyes. In 1995, this group changed its name then to Vegan Outreach. However, one of the co-founders of Vegan Outreach came to regret using the word vegan in their name, and fairly kind of early on, if you like. So this is an AR Zone, Animal Rights Zone interview with Matt Ball, and this is 2011. So Ball was asked if he would call Vegan Outreach the same if he began it all again. And he basically answered that he wouldn't do. He said that within a decade of 1995, they regretted using the word. The word vegan hurts us, he said. And it was about money. He said that animal-friendly foundations and rich non-vegans didn't like the word vegan, and so therefore they wouldn't fund something called vegan, and so therefore their income was adversely affected by actually standing up and calling themselves their own philosophy, essentially. Vegetarian and welfare corporations had a much better chance of being funded. Now, since then, Matt Ball has abandoned veganism as a campaigning idea altogether, and he started something which is still online called One Step for Animals, and that was started in about 2016. I don't know if you've ever seen any of that, but their first video, which they've now since taken down, was essentially Matt Ball attacking veganism, calling vegans equivalent to Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, saying that vegans were rude. And so he's come up with this idea of one step for animals, which are basically asking people to do one thing, which is not to eat chickens. So it goes from Vegan Outreach to don't eat chickens, is his personal journey. So you could say then that that's less than a promising start in the United States, at least. So what about Britain? Now, this is Robin Lane. Robin Lane was the ALF press officer after Ronnie Lee. And this is his 2010 Animal Rights Zone interview. So Robin was part of the Vegan Society ruling council for a while. And in 1996, there was a proposal put to the council of the Vegan Society that an annual vegan event should be initiated. So the Vegan Society membership were in favor, but the Vegan Society itself were hesitant on the basis of the cost of it and the energy that would be expended doing it and the staff who would be, as it were, employed organizing it. So this means then that the very first proposal for the very first national vegan event in Britain was turned down by the Vegan Society. Now, Robin was running a grassroots group at the time called CARF, which stands for Campaign Against Leather and Fur. And so they decided to develop the idea instead of the Vegan Society. And so by 1998, they'd got themselves all set up, and the first national vegan festival occurs, run by CARF, but with some support from the Vegan Society. By 2004, which is only 19 years ago, this event becomes the London Vegan Festival, because other festivals now were springing up in the regions of Britain. So that was what was going on. Now, these other events, we probably know, are often under the name of Veg Fest rather than Vegan Festival. You know, so that was then, and it still is kind of now to that extent. So turning to the publications put out by the grassroots of the movement, this is Arc News, and this is from 1996. Now, Arc News was put together and distributed by an old friend of mine called Neil Lee, and Neil will be the subject of a time tunnel to come. So it was just like a very small kind of A5 booklet. It was kind of zine style, if you like, just photocopied, very kind of rough and ready. You know, the production values weren't great, but it was really just a bulletin to kind of G people up and get them going. And part of it was always this animal rights calendar, which was produced by a group called Veggies, which were and still are, I think, in Nottingham. So it's not easy to read, but I'm going to just pick out the bits that are there, in the sense that they're advertising a massed vegetarian rally for the activists. And then on another page, they're talking about a national vegetarian week. So in the grassroots, they were still following the lead of a lot of the national groups and focusing on vegetarianism rather than veganism. The good thing about the grassroots, though, is that they were the ones who were the quickest and most likely to talk about veganism. So that was a good thing. And here's an example of that. So this is Archangel. Archangel was a very well-produced kind of booklet, very supportive of direct action. This, again, is 1999, and they're advertising the second National Vegan Festival in that. If we turn to the more professional national groups in Britain, this is Viva. Now, Viva's name is interesting in the sense that Viva stands for Vegetarian International Voice for Animals. And if you look to the left of the slide, that is 1998. To the right, it's year 2000. In fact, if you look at that blue kind of heading, that's part of their document, which has a really long interview with Paul McCartney. Linda McCartney had died by then, but they called Paul and Linda McCartney the voice of vegetarianism. And it's interesting because McCartney says in the interview that his son James is the only one of the family who is vegan. And he says, I know that I should be, but I just can never kind of get there. And in more subsequent interviews, he said that Stella went vegan. But, and the same thing, Stella said to Paul, you should go vegan, but he's never been able to make it, really. Right. So to the right, the top square is about pig slaughter and animal welfare. The insert at the bottom is the last message from that piece. And this is where Viva are offering veggie packs for the audience. Bottom right marks the time in 2000 when vegan recipes were getting more attention. So I'm about to lose my voice, I think. Sadly, as I kind of suggested, veganism as a philosophy is never discussed. This was a long period when vegan offered vegetarian starter kits as well as vegan ones. Help, what's going on with my voice here? I'm losing it. Bad start. Hang on a second. I'm doing a Ronnie Lee. Ronnie lost his voice on a Still Alive about a month ago. And he soldiered through, so I'm going to try. I think I'll just try and speak a little bit lower, see if that helps. Okay, so this is where we see the name again, Vegetarian International Voice for Animals. Now again, this now is 2012. This is only 11 years ago. So they've still got the name and they're still promoting vegetarianism. And then if you look at Company's House, as it were, this is their journey towards, or their evolution towards veganism. It seems that their first name was Viva, then Vegetarian International Voice for Animals, then it progressed to the Vegetarian and Vegan Foundation, and then it's now called the Vegan Viva, the Vegan Foundation, as far as I'm aware. Now, again, this is not to kind of pick them out and go, you know, bad people here. This is to show the evolution of these ideas that, first of all, in the movement, but not that long ago, it was always about vegetarianism. And then they started to become a mix and a match between the two ideas. And now, in the last few years, there's been this acceptance of the word vegan and much more of a focus on it. Again, with the caveat that most of it is still based on presenting it as a diet, which is a real shame. This is Animal Aid. Animal Aid has been described as Britain's first animal rights group when it was formed in 1977 by somebody called Jean Pink. I think Jean Pink is almost like a forgotten name in the movement now. So 24 years ago, Animal Aid were all about their veggie months, or the veggie month that was going on, and they were featuring a bunch of British vegetarian celebrities. When it came to their feature on world hunger or food security issues, which are a long-term vegan campaigns and concerns, they offered a vegetarian solution. This is 2006, which is 17 years ago. So Veggie Month is still heavily promoted. But this again is where we start to see now the mix and match. So you're getting vegetarian stuff and vegan stuff in the same publication being featured. This is actually someone called Claudia Tarry urging Animal Aid members to try a vegan diet. And she says this, if you took to the streets and asked people to list words they associate with vegans, the responses are likely to be derogatory, difficult, boring. See if you recognize yourself in this, people. Pasty-faced, preachy, weird, the nut roast and lentils brigade. So that dates it in the sense that this is before the big rise in the vegan meats and everything. If you told them that vegans are often enthusiastic about food, have healthy appetites and a passion for gooey desserts, creamy sauces and the occasional not so healthy fry-up, they probably wouldn't believe you. And then the next line of the bit that I won't read, but it starts, there are 3 reasons for adopting a vegan diet. So again, this is very typical of the period. So when the national groups became brave enough to mention the word vegan, or talk about veganism, the philosophy is not presented as such. It's always presented as a diet, which is a real kind of shame. Because the current definition, the one that we now regard as the official definition of veganism, was developed between 18 and 27 years before 2006. So it was decades before this publication. And of course, the first 4 words of the official definition marks veganism out as a philosophy. Veganism is a philosophy. That's the first 4 words. And yet, That's not what gets covered. It's the dietary aspects of it, which is, as I said, a real kind of shame about it. Dropping back to the 1999 booklet for a moment, Animal Aid were much more willing to feature veganism on their youth pages. So they would use the word much more openly on their youth pages. I don't know, presumably seeing some kind of difference between the adult members and their youth members. But yet again, the caveat again is initially, at least, always presented as a diet. In fact, in this you can't really read it. It's very small, but here they do talk about calf separation. Is one thing that is mentioned, but they also give a warning that, quote, being vegan can be more difficult than going veggie. And so again, there was quite a lot of that kind of rhetoric in the movement as well. Now, this is interesting. This is from 2012. In fact, I messaged the person who presented this in Dublin in 2012, just to check the date. So this is an Animal Aid school talks package. So essentially, it's guidelines for people who are hoping to do talks on behalf of Animal Aid. And the title is Guidelines for Talks on Vegetarianism, 2012. The guide advises Animal Aid school speakers to tell students the definition of vegetarian and of a vegetarian and vegan diet. And so it just goes, tell the students the definitions of a vegetarian and vegan diet. Vegetarians don't eat the flesh of animals, and then there's talk about lacto-vegetarians and so forth, ovo-lacto-vegetarians and everything else, which was more popular in the United States than it was in Britain, funnily enough. But then you've got 1.5 lines about veganism. Vegans avoid eating all animal products such as meat, fish, eggs, dairy products, milk, cheese, and yogurt, and honey. Now, apart from that 1 and a bit line on veganism, the rest of this entire document is entirely focused on vegetarianism. And so this is the kind of like little kind of outline of what you get in the document, which I've got right here. So you've got this definition thing, and then you've got all the stuff about vegetarian diets. And so again, even well into the 21st century, we've still got this reluctance to really talk very much about veganism. So what have we got here? Creating all those terms for types of vegetarians. Yes, well, as I said, it was very popular in the States, to actually describe yourself as, oh, well, I'm an ovo vegetarian, I'm a lacto, and then you got lacto ovo vegetarians, and that's when some people started using the word pescatarian as well. So it became a bit of a thing to start breaking vegetarian in its own little camps in a way. So this is academia then. We're going to turn to how things have been in academia, and we would hope, wouldn't we, that things would be better within the academic world. So this is Gary Francione and Anna Charlton. They ran the Rutgers University Animal Rights Law Center. I think sometimes they call it a clinic. So this is a 1996 document on animal rights and the left. And the one to the right, the New Left Review there that you can see, that's Benton and Redfern on the same topic. And it was quite interesting, really, because in the 1990s, talking about the animal rights movement as a leftist movement wasn't controversial whatsoever. And so Francione is reporting on his own attending a lecture and then going for dinner with the leftist speaker, as it were. Francione chooses the vegetarian option and the lecturer eats flesh. And so this lecturer then notices that Francione's plate is flesh free and asks him, are you still a vegetarian? And Francione writes this: being asked about being a vegetarian legitimizes at least a polite inquiry about being a non-vegetarian. So I answered his question, yes, I'm still very much a vegetarian. Now, this is the point of this in terms of then and now, because Gary Francione went vegan in 1982 when he'd read a book called Fetid Kingdoms by John Bryant, which I've mentioned before, I'm sure. So yeah, this is 1996. So this is 14 years after going vegan, where he's still self-identifying as a vegetarian. Now, think about that in terms of the modern movement now. It's just not something that we would do, you know, which is really quite interesting. Turning to academic books, the left is Francione's excellent book, actually, Rain Without Thunder. And that is the same year as the Law Center commentary that we've just seen. Now, in Rain, there is no mention of veganism at all. To the right is the intro to animal rights. Now, that's 2000. This is 23 years ago. Again, there's no mention of veganism in this book. Which brings me to Dada Funfair, or Fanfare. My friend Melanie Joy, now this is 2010, 13 years ago. Now, this is the book that introduced the movement to the vegetarian concept of carnism. And now this is part of the index, and there's no mention of veganism, but there are several mentions of vegetarianism. And then on one particular page, this is 131, if anybody wants to check. This is Melanie Joy talking about vegans. She describes vegans as pure vegetarians. She says she observes that vegans tend to be less disgusted by eggs and dairy products than they are by meat, as she calls flesh. And then she comes up with what she thinks is the reason for this. Canadian Vegan Forever, how is it possible? No mention of veganism in an animal rights book. Yes, well, quite. I mean, you know, well put. I mean, it's a pertinent question. And also, we're talking about this century now. We're talking about this century. You know, we do get some claims in the movement that we've been doing vegan education, and veganism has been the thing for decades and decades and decades, and it's been a failure. And part of this presentation is to show that that is not true. You know, in some senses, in terms of veganism being so central as it is now, it's only just beginning. So that's one message that I'm hoping to get over. So she's coming up with the reason for why she thinks that vegans are less disgusted by eggs and dairy. And she said it's because it's possible to obtain eggs and dairy without violence, she says. And therefore, because of that, it's less offensive, and because of that, it's less disgusting. Now, vegans consume a plant diet, not because they're personally offended or disgusted by anything. They do it because they want to oppose and boycott animal exploitation and animal rights violations. It's nothing to do with disgust and offense. So, obviously, I mean, I've said this before plenty of times now, in the sense that it is a favorite concept within the vegan movement, carnism. Whereas I tend to think that it's a dangerous thing to promote. And so the question then is, well, why is it dangerous to promote that? And I think that is because if any curious person was to Google or search on another search engine the word carnism, they will be directed to Dr. Melanie Joy, because she coined the word, and then to her organization like Pro-Veg. Not your bun, not milk, absolutely. Only just beginning. Yes, it's almost like a shock, really, isn't it? The fact that, I mean, I've been vegan 44 years, and yet veganism wasn't part of that very much. And you know, Ronnie and I look back and think, how could that be? But it was. This is the history of the movement that we lived through. So you've got Dr. Joy and her Pro-Veg organization, in which there are her close colleagues, her husband, Sebastian Joy, and also Tobias Leonhardt, sometimes known as the vegan strategist. So what nonsense will our vegan curious inquirer get if they ended up with Leonhardt through, trying to find out what carnism is about? So I got a few examples of it. This is the first. On the vegan movement, it's a relatively young movement. It's about food. Now, to me, the kind of food-only vegans are as bad as the animals-only vegans, in the sense that they seem determined to slim down the meaning of veganism to every possible extent. And so whether you're going to classify it as a diet, or if you say it's only about other animals, then that is not giving the expansive version of what veganism actually was, the people who started the movement. Defining veganism as the total avoidance of animal products, always and everywhere, sets the bar unnecessarily high for non-vegans. So the strategy really boils down to, if the movement wasn't really vegan, it would help veganism as an idea, because that means then that vegans would be more plentiful and the vegan movement would be bigger. Essentially what it meant was that Tobias Leonhardt wanted the vegan movement to revert back to being the vegetarian movement. That's essentially what he was getting at. If we would say that veganism meant that 2 times a year, I'm just inventing something, you could eat non-vegan stuff and you still call yourself a vegan, is it possible that a lot of people, it would be a lot more attractive? Okay, so that was another part of it. There's people who say, like, we should always and every moment be open from the beginning about what we are doing. It should be clear that vegan is the end goal. I don't know why they say that. I don't understand that. And then the one that usually gets vegans a little bit agitated is this one. Someone who eats fish or sometimes a cookie with an egg is still a vegan in my eyes. So that to me is rather the danger of vegans employing the vegetarian concept of carnism. Okay, we turn to the States in a way, although we're going to come back to the British version of PETA. So this is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, of course. They featured Paul McCartney for years and years and years. So the first one is Paul and Linda. So we're going back into the 1990s. And then the more recent one is much more recent, of course. And again, whenever they feature McCartney, then they have to talk about vegetarianism rather than veganism, because he himself is not a vegan. Some of their controversial, I've got a whole bunch of these, and I actually slimmed them all down. So I've only got a few examples now, because I thought there's no point in showing everything. These are the kind of ableist adverts. First of all, you've got the kind of fat shaming on the left there, the man and the big belly type of thing. And then the one that caused a lot of trouble was Save the Whales, Lose the Blubber, Go Vegetarian, which was out a few years ago, and that was a big banner. Morrissey there wants people to go vegetarian. I believe in recent years there's reports that Morrissey has finally gone vegan, but I'm not sure. Rise Against is a straight edge band, which always intrigues me. There's apparently 3 of their members are straight edge. And straight edge is usually associated with veganism, but there is a kind of vegetarian kind of version of straight edge, and so they seem to be in that one. So when you see PETA featuring Rise Against, it tends to be a vegetarian thing rather than a vegan one. Again, now this one is interesting. This one indicates some residual doubts, I think, in the national groups about the use of veganism. Chicks Love a Vegetarian. So this is an actor, I believe, for PETA. Now, this is 2019. This is 2019 when this was out. So that again is quite shocking in terms of the timeline, I think. These are, if you can see it, might be more difficult to see it, I'm not quite sure. These are pages currently from the PETA site in Britain. And so they're talking about vegetarians and vegans, mix and match. And then there's a whole bunch of pages where they go through different age groups, but it's always the same, following the same idea of vegetarian and vegan. This is Mercy for Animals, and this is currently again. So they're talking about pro-vegetarian videos in that. And so again, I think that what this is indicating really is that even now, right now, there's still some wariness in some of the national groups about veganism. And so again, this idea of presenting a strong, consistent vegan message is kind of lost, on people. So that's a bit of a shame. This is animal equality. This is now. They have almost all their focus is on factory farming and also on flesh reduction campaigns. And you see at the bottom, visit veg, LaVeck, which is their kind of recipe website. Now, most of the national groups, to give them credit, have got, CR vegan starter kit or CR vegan recipes. Animal equality decided to keep with the word veg. Again, there's no real explanation here of the strong philosophical side of veganism. There's much more about talking about the diet aspects of it, which is, pretty upsetting, really. Now, these are possibly some indications of where this wariness is coming from, in the sense that this is the last few years, and these are grants that Animal Equality have got. And so in the last few years, say about 6 years, they've spent almost $11 million on animal welfare campaigns. These are kind of cage-free promotion, welfare-related campaigning. Now, it's interesting here because they get their grants from something called the Open Philanthropy Project. Now, what they might say, as an echo to what Matt Ball said, is that, yeah, but this project wouldn't give us money for vegan things. So if we want a lot of money off somebody, then we've got to extract the vegan. That's what they might say. A bigger set of grants is this one. This is Mercy for Animals. So they've spent 25 million plus on their corporate welfare campaigns, as they call it. The last grant was $12 million. And so again, I don't actually know. It's really interesting because when I talk to vegans about this, they tend not to know any of this. So I don't know whether this is something to do with the algorithms, the internet algorithms, but vegans tend to be shielders from this information, if you like. And so they don't know. But essentially, there's this thing about we're not committed to go fully vegan. And this is right now for some of the national groups. So for some critics of the movement, like the Gary Francione counter movement, for example, that shows that we don't really have a vegan movement in his view, because veganism is almost presented as one option you can take rather than the ethical option that is required. So that would be the big kind of problem from Francione's point of view. So if you ever see a Gary Francione video or meme and he's saying there isn't an animal rights movement or there isn't a vegan movement, that's what he means. That our movement doesn't present a consistent, strong vegan message all the time. And going back to Leonard, he doesn't even understand why you would. So there you go. Right, some good news. So we're coming up to the actual vegan campaigns now. These are pretty much 100% vegan-based campaigns. And again, it's interesting now to just note the dates that we're talking about. Earthlings Experience came into being in 2015. So that was well before AV, which was, oh, sorry, I got that wrong. 2005 came into being in 2005. AV came into being in 2016. Now, one thing that people don't know about the Earthling Experience is kind of how big it was and how widespread it had become. It had a very kind of DIY element to it, but these are all the kind of chapters or groups, for example. I always have a smile because they've included the Dublin group, which I was a member of, in the UK column, which won't go down well with the membership. So I tend not to tell them. So, you know, if you're watching people in Dublin, don't watch this bit. So yeah, so it's always been a very kind of DIY culture, really, Earthling Experience, and it's summed up with the slogan, which was on that first page. All you need is a laptop, a mask, and a public space. So it was very kind of not lackadaisical, but it was kind of loose, and it meant that people would bring their own laptops. You just get together, do your own thing, and my experience of the Earthling Experience was really good. You get as much in engagement as the so-called professional groups as well. This one goes to modern day, that as we will know the movement now. So AV, as I said, 2016. I couldn't find out We the Free. Now, We the Free is pretty recent. Somebody in the comments is almost bound to know when We the Free started, but it was only a few years ago, maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, is it? And then the other one is the Animal Save movement, which is interesting because that's 2010. So that's actually a lot older than I would have imagined. But then it was called Toronto Animal Save, I believe. And so I'm not quite sure when it moved to, you know, the kind of international kind of global thing. I'm not quite sure. And then finally on this is 2015, and this is Go Vegan Island. So what we now understand as Go Vegan World, which are these images, started life in 2015 as Go Vegan Island, and then they became Go Vegan World in 2016. And a lot of people will have seen their huge billboards around about the place. They tend to do the big kind of motorway type billboards, the ones in the city centres, but they also do things like adverts on buses and that kind of stuff and all that, and smaller adverts inside the buses or inside trams, that kind of thing. So it seems then that there's much more evidence, if you like, that we've moved now to a time where many more of even the bigger, well-known international organizations are taking a pretty firm vegan line. It's just interesting that we've still got some residual kind of wariness in the movement. You know, I suppose it's good that the newer influencers tend to be strict on veganism, although there are some that are trying to slim vegan down to be some kind of militant version of the RSPCA, but there are some others. Getting commentary now from the cat. So yeah, so that's your time tunnel, really. So have I missed any questions? Is the question, or I got time for a couple if you want to sling them up now. But as a relatively long-term vegan myself, I find it difficult to get over to relatively new vegans this story of the newness of it. You know, they come into a movement and they just see what is, but it's not been there very long. It's only just started. So again, with that kind of caveat, if anyone tells you that we've been doing vegan education for many decades and it's not been a success, they're frankly not telling you the truth, because we're literally only just starting. In historical terms, this is a new thing within our own movement. even though we call it the vegan movement, it's is mainly focused on vegetarianism, and then you've got that mix and match, but then you've got the big focus on dietary aspects. So in terms of an unequivocal, strong vegan message, which is consistent and all the time, we really are at the beginning of that. And so it can't be true that we've been doing this for decades and decades and it's not worked. It just physically can't be a valid thing to say. Right. Okay, people. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I shall see you next time when we shall do another vegan time tunnel. Thanks very much.
But we learn pretty quick, and so we have to have these agents of social. Okay, so really we're looking at a snip. We're going to try and lift the lid on the title. How do we become animal-loving animal users? Try and lift the lid on that. We can't really delve into it too much, but this is a little snippet then from my research work. And you can see it there on the top there, particularly a chapter called Species Barrier Maintenance. If you'd like to actually read that, the easiest way to get into it is if you Google Roger Yates social construction. Usually that comes up. Obviously, I'm going to be showing you a PowerPoint and just picking out a few texts from that, just a few highlighted things. So if you want to see the full one at the end, if it's intrigued you enough, then if you email me, roger.yates@ucd.ie. UCD is the University College of Dublin, so that's where I'm an occasional lecturer. What we're really doing then with this thing is going into something that's very basic in sociology, which is the processes of socialization. Although it's a basic concept within the discipline, as you can see here, it can get quite complicated. These are the agents of socialization. We'll be sticking really to the bit at the top in the middle there, kind of family socialization. When we talk about socialization in sociology, we tend to split it up into two things. We talk about primary and then secondary. There is a concept called adult socialization, but mainly we talk about primary and secondary. So we're going to be in that kind of basic kind of area. What we really mean, though, because we make some big claims about socialization, is it's the process by which we become members of society, how we become citizens. It's how we learn the norms and values and the attitudes of our society. There is an aspect to it, though, which is the fact that we learn to conform to those norms and values as well. And in fact, sociologically, one interesting thing is that most people are conformists in a sociological sense. We tend to conform to basic ideas of our own society and our own culture as we're born into it. Even people who self-identify as radical, if you, as it were, scratch between the surface, you'll find that there's quite a lot of conformity in their basic core views, which they learn as children. The top left there, you'll see that's the secondary socialization, people like McDonald's. These are the corporations. Bottom there on the right, that's gender socialization. And then the one on the left there at the bottom is a very kind of basic traditional idea in sociology, the idea that social institutions are pouring the norms and values of society into the heads of children. And that means, of course, that socialization is a generational thing. Our norms and values of society are transmitted generationally. And then the last thing on this is this slide shows us two things. First, it's seen as a problem if children are not socialized. So you get kind of, as it were, wild kids, unsocialized children. And in fact, the education system is often seen as the mechanism for which society kind of knocks kids into shape if the family have not done it in the first place. And then in terms of socializing agent, then in a conventional sense, it doesn't apply to everybody, obviously. In a conventional sense, you're talking about the first job is mum. She is the main socializing agent in a kind of conventional sense. And we are talking about very basic things, how to use a knife and fork and how to go to the toilet, this kind of thing. Human beings, when we're born, we're helpless beings, but we learn pretty quick. And so we have to have these agents of socialization. So what's really going on is this: the transmission of society's norms and values, society's culture, and that is transmitted generationally. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. But in terms of our focus, when I have more time and a different audience, a non-vegan audience, if you like, I would give out pencil and paper, and I would just ask people, without any more cues or clues, will you please draw me a farm? And generally speaking, this is what I get back. It's not as good as this. Usually a line drawing of this kind of thing. The only people who don't draw this are animal advocates. I did a talk at my university in North Wales a few years ago, and there was 2 animal advocates in the audience, and they drew battery cages and sow stalls and slaughter lines. Everyone else drew this. And so there's some kind of common themes that we get. And of course, what people are doing is they're drawing on those early learning books that they experienced as kids. So the themes, and this is the main one, is this is a pretty happy place. And so this is the kind of mind's eye farm for a lot of people in 2 ways. This is either the farm that they know about or the farm that they want to know about, even if they know other things as well. So if you're an animal advocate on the street and you talk about the use of other animals in farming, the chances are people are going to think about this. This is their cultural resource to answer you. This is what they think of in terms of animal farming. So it's a happy place, all free-range beings there. There's no cages. The other animals are said to have homes. They have adventures out in the field, and then they come home and they are there with their family units. That's another main theme. You've got family units, family groups. In fact, it's usually a bit more elaborate than this. Here we've got ducks and ducklings, but normally we've got chickens and chicks and horses and foals, etc., cows and calves, all smiling, all going back to their home after a day of adventures with their family, and everything is kind of hunky-dory. From an animal rights point of view, you don't have this. In either the pictures that people produce or the books from which they are using as a resource, there is no suggestion of slaughterhouse trucks. They're not going to arrive. So this is a concept that we'll come back to a little later on, the issue of kind of end use. There's no suggestion of end use here. You know, it's just the fact that here you have a farm full of other animals. They all have a great time, and that's the end of the story. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Going back to sociology, but I'm actually using some work from a psycholinguistic professor, Stanley Sapon here. But he's looking at the generational transfer of culture and norms and values. And he does it in a general sense, but also looks at how our relationship with other animals, other sentient beings. The important part is the bit that's picked out in white. Now, this is North American culture, and children are taught to be kind to one another, to be kind to animals, to avoid cruelty of any sort, that violence is not the way to resolve conflicts, and the taking of life is wrong. Now, normally, that creates a few kind of smirks in the audience because we talk about North American culture and you think, what? But the interesting part about that, and part of my story, is that this is the initial thing that the children are taught. And essentially what Sapon is talking about is what happens when a little bit of reality comes in. That's where it becomes interesting. But what we get, according to Sapon, is a kind of package of norms and values. He calls it a syllabus. And of course, again, they're passed on generationally. This is the kind of power. Sociologically, the most powerful things in our lives are the things we don't particularly have to think about. You know, like easygoing oppression, easygoing speciesism, even easygoing racism. If things are like that, unsaid, unspoken about in your society, then they're powerfully within you. It's kind of like we internalize those values. once people internalize social values, they become part of that person. And that means it's quite hard to shake them then. And of course, we vegans are in the shaking of values business. Okay, so he says that eventually we kind of had to cue our kids into the fact that society is not quite as rosy as we first told them. Some of the values of real society violate the values that we've just spoken about. And in fact, the violation of those values are often celebrated. So in some senses, this is a problem, and certainly psychologically can't be beneficial, Sapin says. And effectively what he says is that we've got a two-tier value system. We have the kind of goodness and light at the beginning, and then we gradually cue our kids in to the reality. Now, this is a general thing. It's not just about our relationships with other animals. We also do it in relation to, say, sexual violence and lots of other kind of issues. Parents protect their kids from knowledge. Okay, so we tend to think, well, we'll tell them this, and then when they're old enough to know, we'll tell them that. It's kind of a natural thing to do as parents. We protect our kids in that way, and we also do it in relation to our use of other animals. So this is about the only thing I'm going to read out. It said that adults typically raise children from birth to 5 or 6 years in a kind of fantasy land of ideal behavior on the part of the world's inhabitants. In this land of goodness and mercy, other animals are humanity's friends, and vice versa applies. So this is the kind of vision that we get initially. And when Sapin looked at the publications from which people draw those pictures that I talked about, then he finds the same pattern. There's no kill lines, there's no slaughter. And in fact, generally speaking, in a very overt sense, you don't see in these early learning books other animals being eaten or on the plate in an overt sense of that's what it is. You might see pizza being eaten, or you might see hamburgers, but you don't necessarily understand that you're dealing with a dead body, essentially. So this is Sapin's research question, which is of interest to us, because what indeed does happen when we kind of move from that fantasy land and we start to learn that actually some of our values in society are not so good. What's really going on is that we're moving from being moral patients into being moral agents. Now, this is quite important for us. In the animal rights sense, we are already involved with a lot of animal exploitation before we're moral agents. We're already involved. We're already eating them. We're already wearing them. We're already using the cosmetics and medication. We're already involved. We're already there. And then we become moral agents, and we can think about moral issues. And then you think, right? Some part of what goes on is that when people go vegan, they kind of have to admit that hitherto they've been making moral error upon moral error until then. And then they kind of have to deal with it in a sense. What Sapin is saying, as I suggested, is that there is a reconditioning goes on. Really, we're cueing people in to adult life. And what he says about adult life is it's full of denial. Now, one thing we do know about human beings, there's an extensive literature on this, is that we are very good at denial. Going all the way back to Freud and onwards, we are very good at denial. We know how to deny things. There's lots of cases, some very disturbing cases where people do things and then they deny that they've done it afterwards. Some really kind of disturbing things. We're really good at this. I've got a chapter in my work about denial where it's something that we shouldn't underestimate. It's very important. So this is what goes on. We're transforming other animals from this fantasy people into objects of utility, as Sapin puts it. In other words, we start to cue our kids in that we use other animals in a variety of ways. And so we might do that by just talking about categories. For example, we might use the category pets to talk about a particular type of use. We might then talk about the ones that we eat. We can talk about the ones that we wear. We can use categories like wildlife or vermin. And so we're kind of cueing our kids in to the fact that our relationship with other animals is far more complicated than what was initially kind of taught to us. And in some senses, kind of deal with that and also kind of eat your food. And another general kind of psychoanalytical point is that society is full of denial, which means that in some senses, we do kind of lie to ourselves. So adults lie to themselves. We also lie to other people, and we lie to our kids. From a psychoanalytical point of view, that's actually common, and it's actually understandable. It's a functional thing to do. Being absolutely, totally truthful all the time would be quite a hard thing to do. We often say that knowledge equals power, but there's a very real sense that knowledge also can equal pain. And the animal advocates here who make it their business to kind of give out literature will know about this, because in some senses, if you try to give somebody a leaflet on the street, you're kind of potentially giving them some pain if it's only psychic pain. If you flip it around the other way and you're the recipient and there's an animal advocate coming for you and you go, okay, this person's trying to give me some information. Am I going to welcome this information? Maybe I'm not. Maybe this is not going to be a story that I want to hear much about. Maybe this is something that I would like to stay fairly kind of pushed away. You know, it's a very real thing. Carol Adams talks about it with a fairly famous concept called the absent referent. I don't know if you've heard of the absent referent, but essentially one example of that would be when we go into a restaurant, we don't order a dead body. We order a steak. But by saying steak, that is the socially sanctioned way of ordering a dead body. Okay, that's what's going on. We are ordering a part of a dead body, but we call it a steak. And so there's the actual reference is absent. An example of that, when I started volunteering with the VIP here on my T-shirt, Vegan Information Project in Dublin, we were given permission to do some stalls in Temple Bar, which is a very famous kind of touristy place in Dublin. I'm sure some of you have been there. And our stall was pretty close to a hamburger bar. And they complained to the people who gave us permission in the first place. And we said, but we don't have any graphic photographs on the stall, which is true. We don't. But we were missing the point because it doesn't need graphic photographs. What was going on is that they're eating their hamburgers and looking over at pictures of farmed animals. And it's making the connection again. It's bringing back the absent referent. The thing that they have scrupulously and very carefully pushed away, the animal part of their hamburger, is being brought back into their consciousness. And we do know that vegans, just being in a room sometimes is uncomfortable. Because if people know you're a vegan, you bring back, by your very presence, the absent referent. You're bringing back the issue that people have very carefully pushed away, that people are in denial of. So if people react to you in that negative way, these are the reasons why. These are the reasons why they're not comfortable about you being there. You don't have to say anything. Just you being there is enough. If they know you're a vegan, then it can be a problem. So people don't want to know necessarily. People say all the time, I don't want to know. Don't tell me. You've probably seen this in your family or whatever. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. It'll spoil my dinner. Very, very common thing. So what is it better to know? Because in the literature, it's interesting. There are other things to do with knowledge than know it. Say that again. There are other things to do with knowledge than know it. We cannot know things. And there's a couple of ways that works. We can actually physically not know, or we can kind of know a little bit and then say, okay, I know about that now, I'll move on. Don't tell me about the third world starving, the developing countries and food security. I know all that. I got the Live Aid DVD. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I'll move on. So it's a kind of shallow understanding. So you don't really fully know. So what's better to know? We're back to the books. This is one of the books that I looked at in my research, Tales from Mud Puddle Farm. As you can see here, there's an entire community of other animals and two human animals, the farmers, Farmer Rafferty. What's going on in this book is a really cozy social contract. a reciprocal kind of thing going on. And it's summed up by that bottom bit there, if you can see it. You look after me, and I'll look after you. That's what the farmer says to the other animals. You look after me, and I'll look after you. How that plays out in the story is really fascinating. What you've got is there are free-range hens on this farm, and they lay their eggs for the farmer. It's almost like this is the rent they pay. And, you know, farmers will actually say this to us. You know, they don't do it to reproduce their species. They don't do it for themselves. They don't do it just because it's biological. They do it for the farmer. And in particular, there are 2 cows on the farm, and they let their milk down for him. This is interesting, as though they could keep it up as one thing. But what's interesting on this level, there are no calves on this farm, just adult cows who provide milk for the farmer. There's no issue about pregnancy. There is no tapping into mammalian biology. We might know this as vegans. Isn't it strange that there are so many people out there in society, they don't seem to know that they're mammals and what that means, including women. They don't know what it means to be a mammal. And so they say that cows just give milk. They give milk for life. But they know that they couldn't do that. You know, they would dry up, you know. But they don't transfer that to other mammals. And part of that is the fact we're in denial again. We don't self-identify as animals. If people call you an animal in the street, they're insulting you, right? We don't self-identify as mammals, and we certainly don't self-identify as apes, do we? Again, if somebody called you an ape, now if somebody called me an ape, I should say, yeah, I know. But we don't. We see it as an insult, right? So that's what's going on in this situation. Very cozy social contract where the other animals work along with the farmer. Now, just to bring this back, this issue came back into my consciousness a few years after the research in a kind of weird and unusual place. And it was this. Came back as a McDonald's Happy Meal. And in fact, there's a YouTube of the illustrator talking about this. And he's kind of going, wow, you know, I did the illustrations for this book. And now McDonald's have done it on the Happy Meal. You know, how fab is that, as it were? But I was thinking, wow, there's a bit of a disconnect there, isn't there? You know, somebody draws pictures of happy animals, and now there's bits and pieces of animals in this box. But in fact, it is actually quite easy to think about. And the real key to it is the word happy. So we've got other animals on happy farms, and what better to perpetuate this myth than that they find themselves in a happy meal? So everything is happy right from birth to slaughter, which is never mentioned in the first place. So it's not particularly difficult to think that these other animals find themselves on the cover of a McDonald's Happy Meal. It's not as shocking as we might initially think. Okay, this is some other, just to finish off really, some other publications that I looked at. Some of the very basic ones are really kind of getting the kids, you know what they do, you get the kids to, what do animals say? You know, what does a cow say? What does a dog say? That kind of thing. However, the narrative of these books can get quite complicated fairly quickly. The one in the middle there, Nubbins and the Tractor, that's a fascinating book. It's about animal property. It's about the transfer of animal property from one human being to another. And that taps into the fact that culturally, other animals are things. In law, there are 2 categories, persons and things. They are things. They are items of property. We can kill our animal property so long as we don't cause unnecessary suffering, which is a cornerstone of animal welfare. We can kill our pets. We can kill our animal companions. We can do it ourselves so long as we don't cause unnecessary suffering. Normally what we do is take them down to the vet once we're fed up of our living ornaments. So what happens in the story is that the farmer buys a tractor. This makes Nubbins the horse redundant. And so Nubbins is going to be sold. And the son doesn't like that. And so he says to his dad, can you transfer the ownership of Nubbins to me? which he does, and then the tractor breaks down. And so that means that suddenly Nubbins is needed again to work on the farm. And the end of the story is you've got the son, now the animal owner, and the owned, happy as Larry, going back to work on the farm. You know, so there is actually quite an interesting narrative going on there. The Four Ways Farm is a kind of entire community of other animals. Humans don't seem to appear there at all, as though they just live there and have their adventures, etc. When we get into the teenage market, we're back into categories now. This is Animals and You. It's kind of like a poppy kind of magazine. It's aimed at teenage girls or young women. And they're really into the categories game. Most of it is about pets. Most of it is about the other animals that are categorized as pets. Free living beings get a mention too. And actually, farmed animals do get a mention, but only as food. So what you would get, say, there's a Christmas edition, and the question there is, what should we have for Christmas lunch? And the answer is, well, we'll have the traditional turkey and all the trimmings. So the image there that you get is of the child and the pet enjoying the unnamed farm animal. Now, again, playing with the categories that we've come to understand. Some of them we use as pets, some of them we use as food, some of them we use to wear. And finally, we've got Market Day. This is like a board game. It's a bit like Monopoly. And the players in Market Day are farmers, and they rush around the board, having all kinds of adventures, and they win. You know, each farmer is a winner once their farm is full of other animals. There's no questioning issue about why would they do that? What are they going to do with it? So there's no end game again. It's as though culturally, well, we're dealing with farmers here. What do farmers do? They fill their farms with other animals. That's what they do. So this is what this game is all about. Quite an interesting kind of issue in the sense that end use, again, culturally, is absent. You know, why spoil the game by getting them to take them to the slaughterhouse? And so we're trying to lift the lid on this question then. How do we end up in this state? And the sociological answer is that we're born into a culture in which this is the norm. We're born into the culture where it's said to us that you can love animals and you can eat them. You can love animals and you can use them. You can love animals and they can be used in vivisection laboratories, etc. You can even love them and hunt them. Okay? This is a cultural thing. And the kind of categories help because we know that there are some we use as pets. The ones who are designated as pets, their use is to be petted and to be loved. The ones designated as food, their use is to be eaten. Which is why sometimes in some horrible, filthy, disgusting foreign land, some people make categorical errors, don't they? And they start frying and boiling up the cats and the dogs. And all the people in Britain and elsewhere, they go rather upset about that because they're doing it to the wrong types. That's the problem there. And so you get all this racist stuff coming out. You know, the damn Chinese and the damn Japanese and everything else, because they are using other animals which our culture says is wrong. Really, they're just using them. I mean, in Japan, for example, foxes are seen as sacred. We hunt them, you know. So that kind of lifts the lid on this question. And it shows that we are born into a deeply speciesist society. That is our job. As animal advocates, as vegans, we have to challenge cultural speciesism. If we don't, we'll never win. We can't win so long as the culture of our society is deeply speciesist. It's not about individual butchers or vivisectors. It's about the culture. We have to find a way of shifting the culture to make it not acceptable anymore to teach our kids that they can be animal-loving, animal users. No.
And were you able to follow a plant-exclusive diet in prison, or was that just impossible at the time?
Yes, in the day you had actually to be an official member of the Vegan Society. So the vegetarian diet was always established already, and in fact it was called a special diet. And a lot of the ordinary cons would switch to a vegetarian diet when they go into prison, even though they weren't vegetarian, on the grounds that it was known to be better than the standard diet.
Wow.
But in terms of veganism, you had to actually produce, the Vegan Society had this little kind of deep red membership card. And we asked the Vegan Society, when people get arrested and put away, can you just send them a card and we'll send you the money afterwards, kind of thing. And they said no to that,
Wow.
which was a real shock. And so we thought, okay, so we just forged their membership card and just sent them to people anyway. and then Ronnie was saying that a lot of people were influenced to kind of go vegan because of him in prison, and so in the end, he always claims that the Vegan Society was a large criminal organization in Britain for a time, because suddenly you got all these people committing these terrible crimes becoming members in order to get the vegan diet, you know.
Wow.
It's all a bit weird. I don't think you have to do that now. I think you just state it now, I think, rather than having to prove it, as it were. In my prison, you used to have to make an application in order to make an application. So everything in prison is slow. People move slow. You slouch around. You know, you walk around slow and all that, and everything is slow. And so to get anything done is almost a nightmare. And it just kind of slows everything down, which in a weird way kind of helps people deal with their time, I suppose.
Hey, Ronnie.
Hi again, Roger. Long time no see.
I normally check to see if you are still alive before I play that, but I think I've got some evidence of it. So
you already knew I was.
So how you doing, mate? All right?
Doing okay. Yeah, I've been celebrated World Vegan Day by door dropping some leaflets in my village to encourage people to go vegan at Christmas and obviously stay vegan afterwards.
Yeah, and stop messing about.
Yes.
Okay.
Stop pissing about and go vegan, or else.
Yeah. Stop.
Basically.
Yeah. What you waiting for?
I know where you live.
Right. Okay. Now then, still alive, folks, and since we are, we've got to talk about something. And what's the topic, Ronnie?
Well, it's called Unbreakable, isn't it? That's
with
a question mark. One of my favourite films is called Unbreakable, starring Bruce Willis. I don't know if anyone remembers it. It's probably, don't know how long ago it was, 15 years ago, perhaps more. This guy that couldn't be killed, basically. Yeah. No, you don't remember. No.
Yeah.
Might only be me. At a time when I used to watch movies more than I kind of do now. And it's kind of about, and it's really I think quite topical for World Vegan Day, in that it's about how we managed to keep going so long with this activism. You know, both of us, you know, and all these years we've been vegan, and we've been, you know, I've been 51 years, you're 40, how many?
44
years. And, you know, we've not just been vegans, we've been activists in various ways for animal liberation all that time. And so how did we keep going? I mean, I've known so many people who've kind of fallen by the wayside, who've kind of, you know, they've suddenly done a load of stuff, you know, they're very active, and then never hear of them again. And so, you know, and that applies to loads of people. And there's not many of us.
Yeah, and of course, generally speaking, of course, burnout is a problem for social movements without a doubt. So that's a more kind of general issue. Now, I'm trying to remember whether I got because I sent you a message that I'd received, but I can't remember whether it was a comment on a thread or whether it was a private message. But I think somebody was saying that they're struggling, and how do you and Ronnie carry on, type of thing. So
yeah.
That's right. And yes, I mean, it's a good question. I tell you what I used to say. I used to say what Francione said, which is almost like, well, I don't really have the right to stop. It's not as though, as it were, the other side have stopped. So there is that. I'm not quite sure that's a particularly good thing to say anymore. But I do feel as though, well, if they don't stop, I'm not going to stop. I mean, I think that's part of the answer for me, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly is. It certainly is for me. I mean, basically, my activism's gone through, various stages, and I think each stage has kind of
gone through the mill, Ronnie.
Gone through the mill. Yes. Yeah. Gone through the scrubs in London, certainly. Yeah, I think each period has kind of demanded, I think, different sort of resources from me in order to keep going. I mean, obviously, I started off, very much at the sharp end of things. Became vegan in 72, and within a few weeks, I was involved with hunt sabs, and of course, that's not exactly stress-free, is it? Up against these, very nasty people that, don't like you trying to stop them trying to kill a small animal.
Have you ever come close, Ronnie?
Close to what being?
Well, kind of burning out, or taking a break, taking it easy.
I've had periods of time where I've kind of had to slow down. I mean, in a sense, one of those times is now. I mean, obviously, my energy levels aren't as high as they used to be. The time I have available isn't as much as I used to have either, for various reasons. So I've had to kind of tailor my activism kind of according to that. So kind of recently. But the idea of like stopping altogether, and no, that's never. No, that's never occurred to me. And so, I mean, I think in the early days, I think back now to some of the things I did in the early days. I kind of shudder. I thought, how did I do that? But I think what kind of kept me going then was like, I mean, first of all, anger at what was being done to the other animals, but I think also that I felt that whatever happened to me could never be as bad as what was happening to them. Yeah. So that I kind of didn't have any justification in kind of feeling sorry for myself or thinking too much about my own woes, because what was happening to the other animals was so much worse by like a billion.
Did I ever tell you my zoot suit story?
No. Sounds interesting.
Yeah. So I was inside in prison during my 4 years, and I said when I was interviewed by Alex recently that if I'd have been convicted at the same time as you lot, it would have been a lot easier to do it all together, probably. Although you were separated off, I think. Yeah. So you were bound to be kind of on your own, but I would have probably gone through with Brendan and that I would have thought. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't, and so I don't know. I got an inkling of that my food was being tampered with or something, so I stopped eating, and it wasn't like a hunger strike. It's just that I was kind of like, well, I don't know whether this is completely plant-based anymore, right? And so one day I fainted, And so I woke up in the prison hospital, and I said that. I said, well, I've stopped eating because, and of course that was a ridiculous thing to say from their point of view, right, kind of thing. And so they grabbed me, threw me into this cell, still in the kind of hospital unit, ripped all my clothes off and gave me this kind of plastic kind of zoot suit, which was kind of like a gladiator's kind of tunic thing, which was tied with these binder things and all that. And so I didn't have any clothes on except for that. And there was no bed. There's just like a little thin mattress on the floor, I think. And so I was thinking, blimey, right? But that was what got me through it. I said, well, look, no matter what they do, I'm not in a laboratory. I'm not a farmed other animal. And so that was the feeling that I had that gave me the strength to kind of go through that.
Yeah, that's certainly what I felt in jail as well. All right, I'm in jail, but it's I'm still getting like 3 meals a day. I've got a bed to sleep in. I've got books to read. There's no comparison between that and what so many billions of other animals go through. So I had no right to kind of bemoan my situation, really. Then that's so that's kind of very, very similar.
Thank you. I'm assuming that's Declan. Thank you.
Yes, happy Vegan Day, Declan, and to all the animals at your sanctuary. But yeah, that's kind of how that's kind of very much how because you get in prison, you get constant moaning from other prisoners. They moan about the food constantly, even though for most of them, the prison food is almost certainly far more nutritious than the food they eat outside. Constantly moaning about the food all the time. I never did.
Ronnie, another thing that I said in the Seb Alex interview, I said that a lot of people went onto the veggie diet, didn't they? Because they knew it was better than I think he was quite surprised when I said that.
Yeah, because of course the food's cooked en masse in prison, and because not so many people are on the vegetarian diet, that's cooked in smaller quantities. So the quality tends to be better, and even more so with the vegan, the vegan diet, the vegan friendly diet, probably preferred to say these days. That was, so few of those meals were cooked. There was better attention was paid to it, and so a lot of guys went onto the vegan diet because of that, and also because at the time we got a goodie bag. We got this bag every week which contained yeast extract and peanut butter and peanuts and raisins and different things, didn't it? And tea bags to sort of make up for what they thought we might not be getting in the actual food from the prison.
I remember we used to go. We ended up with a little box, didn't we? We had a box each of this stuff, and I do remember all the other cons are kind of going, "What's all that?" Differential treatment.
Yeah, they claim to be, because at the time you had to have a membership card of the Vegan Society. I think that's changed now, and you can just say you're vegan. But in those days, they didn't believe it if you said you were vegan, and you had to get a membership card from the Vegan Society to prove it. So what happened? You got all these cons join the Vegan Society, because it was a few quid to join, but the benefits far outweighed the cost, because what they would do is this goodie bag, like you say, you had a box. I remember where I was, it was like a white carrier bag full of all this stuff, and they would sell it for tobacco. They'd sell the peanut butter to other cons for tobacco, because of course tobacco is the currency in jail.
Yeah.
And so you suddenly got all these. I often joke about at the time the Vegan Society being the biggest criminal organization in the world, because of all these criminals that joined so they could get the vegan diet in prison, and then of course there was a case of people forging the card, wasn't there, Roger, as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Serena did that because they refused to give them out. But going back to the central question, I mean, it's something that we. I know we're being a bit light-hearted about it, but I think we both realise it is a a serious issue too.
Yeah.
Because I think that when you think about it, a vegan knows stuff that other people go to outrageous lengths to not know.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and I've always said that, you know, vegetarians know more about flesh than flesh eaters, and vegans know more about flesh and everything else than vegetarians.
Yes. Yes.
And we kind of put ourselves in front of some pretty iffy knowledge, right?
Yes.
Yes. And then, of course, we do know that in recent years, and we've talked about this before, it's people will do that sometimes on purpose when it comes to the videos.
Yes.
Which we both have difficulty with, because that seems to me to be a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, obviously, it was awareness of all that caused me to become vegan and to become an activist. But I think the activism helped me to deal with it, because I was concentrating on what do I do about this rather than on what is this, if you see what I mean. I'd seen what it was. I didn't need to see it anymore. I just wanted to do something about it. So I was focused on I was very much kind of focused on the solution rather than, rather than what was happening all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that plays in even to what we've just said, because, for example, if you're editing a video, you're still looking at all the terrible things, but you're kind of doing it for a purpose rather than just consuming it, kind of thing. So I think the fact that we both switched very quickly to activism, and you know, I mean, like I saw that magazine in 1977, and it was about anti-blood sports, and it talked about the three different groups. So there's the League, the HSA, and there's another one, wasn't there? It was Council Against.
Yeah, there was another anti-blood sports group, but I don't know what became of them. I think they kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I think it might have had British or something in the title or something.
Yeah, there was one. Yeah,
but I would, if you think about it, the fact that I went straight for the SABs meant what you just said is that okay, I've learned about this now, and now I'm going to do something about it. Yeah. Whereas if I'd have gone for the League, I'd have just been a member of the League, sat there. Right.
Yeah, sat there getting all the information about the terrible things that are happening to the animals. Yeah. And I think this is the thing, and I think that kind of, I think, you know, even today that I steadfastly avoid looking at graphic footage of what happens to other animals, because I don't need to. You know, I already know what goes on. I'm already vegan. I'm already trying to educate other people to become vegan. So why do I need to constantly look at that stuff? I don't. You know, why would I constantly upset myself by viewing that when it actually makes no difference? Because I'm already active. You know, that's for people. That's for non-vegans to see, isn't it? That kind of stuff. It's not for me to constantly look at. But I do know other vegans who constantly look at that stuff. Who constantly.
Yeah, I've known some as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to.
It's like a duty, don't they?
One of the reasons I blocked other people from posting on my Facebook, because some of them were posting the most horrific, most graphic footage, because I suppose they thought, well, Ronnie's got a lot of friends, so if I put something on his like Facebook, those people will see it, forgetting that nearly all those people are vegan already. So all you'd be doing is like traumatizing those people unnecessarily because they're already vegan. So I stop. I say, right, nobody can post on there because you're posting that stuff, you know. And I won't. I rigorously avoid watching anything like that because I don't need to. Right? And I think there's an element of masochism, you know, about our movement, that people seem to want to subject themselves to those images. And that
first of all, the answer to that is, well, I need to know to be able to talk to people about it, right?
But you only need to know. You only need to see it once to be able to talk. And basically, you know, what's, but basically, the kind of argument for veganism is really very simple, isn't it? I mean, certainly,
No, but I think it's the details, because if you think about the street activists, they like the idea that they've got an answer to anything that comes up, and so I think therefore they're constantly looking for what other people are saying in the movement, and in order for them to be able to say it too. And if you take your lead from someone like Earthling Ed or Joey, they're always putting graphic stuff up.
Yeah,
so
yeah. My activism is different to that. It's very different to that.
Yeah, but if you're a vegan that is looking at that stuff for educational purposes, then you're also going to be exposed to all the graphic stuff which you say you're avoiding, right?
Yeah, I avoid it because I don't need to. I mean, I don't need to use it in my activism. I have literature about veganism that I give to people, and that doesn't tend to be graphic. I mean, it's got figures of, about numbers of animals that are killed and why it's wrong for us to do that. But I don't really give graphic stuff to people. I'm not saying I'm not making a judgment on whether it's good or bad to give, graphic material to people. It's just something I don't do. I'll give people like basically printed information that they can read through, and I'll have conversations with people, but conversations tend to be kind of really more general, about the fact that we don't, no matter what the numbers are, that we don't have a right to do those things to other animals. Whether it's one animal or whether it's a billion other animals, we don't have a right to do it. That's the kind of, that's the more the kind of conversation I'd be involved in.
Yeah, Deb says this, which is obviously completely true. I think that well, going back to the Earthling Ed and the Joey type stuff, if vegans are watching that in order to become better advocates, because they feel they can learn from their influencers, and then they're subject to the violent footage, then the putting together a video like that is kind of dangerous in movement terms, because you're kind of okay, well, people are going to watch your stuff in order to become educated in terms of being an advocate, but you're also going to kind of keep hitting them with all this stuff that is going to potentially traumatize them. And as Deb says, perpetual grief and mourning and anger.
And I think the other thing as well that can cause burnout is people's expectations are too high. Like they think that if they learn about all this stuff that's happening to other animals, they want to do something about it. They throw themselves into activism, expecting that if they kind of throw themselves into it, that's going to yield really quick results, and of course it doesn't. And then those people become disheartened, and they drop out. And so it's really important to emphasize to people that what we're dealing with is a marathon, not a sprint. We're not going to see rapid change. The change we're going to see is gradual, and we've got to be in it for the long haul. We can't expect like big immediate results. And I think
but Ronnie, don't you think that message in itself can cause people to go, oh, I won't bother then?
Well, because well, hopefully not, because the thing is that it's a long-term result is better than no result at all. Like if you look back, say look back at the slave trade, the Britain's involvement in the slave trade, the campaign to end that took 80 years. To end that took 80 years. you know, and with, you know, speciesism and the oppression of other animals being, you know, even more deep seated within, you know, the culture within human culture, it can be expected that, you know, the struggle for animal liberation is going to take longer than that. And yet, you know, the slave trade was brought to an end in the at the end. Just Britain's involvement in it came to an end.
But to your point, though, Ronnie, I imagine that the people who joined the anti-slavery movement, when they first joined it, they were all kind of, you know, let's get rid of this.
Some of them may have dropped out, thinking that slavery would end tomorrow if they made enough of a fuss. And we have to, you know, kind of, you know,
this is kind of human nature, isn't it? Really,
it kind of is, and I think there's, you know, there's other aspects of like human traits within human behavior that I think are kind of are problematic for what we're trying to achieve. I think that's one of the traits is people want a quick fix. People want things straight away, and if it doesn't come straight away, they become disheartened. But so it's really important. I think when, you know, people that are kind of new to activism, I think it's really important to impress on them that this is, you know, this is a long struggle. You know, that you're not going to not really see results very, very quickly.
Do you say that, Ronnie, to people that?
Yes, I've said it to people. Yeah. You know,
it's a hard sell, surely. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining, but it's going to be a
well. But you see, the thing is that you see, you know, with vegan outreach, you've kind of got. You kind of have got your short-term gains. You see, I think this is another, you know, big, you know. Big plus for vegan outreach. What you know, in terms of why it's so important, you've kind of got the long-term aim of changing the culture of human society. You know, so that society is no longer, you know, we have an animal liberationist society instead of a speciesist one. You know, that's the long-term aim. But short-term, if you educate one person to become vegan, that ends demand. You know, here in the UK, that ends demand for over 100 animals every year to be slaughtered. So you've got the short term. We've got, you know, if you want to save, or spare, shall I say, it's probably a more accurate word. If you want to spare the maximum number of animals, the way to do it is vegan outreach. Far more animals are spared by vegan outreach, but than any other activity in relation to campaigning for other animals. So you have got that short term. You have got that. Short-term win, so to speak. It's just that's not always, you know, that's not always, or it's mostly something that you don't know about. You don't know who you've turned vegan. Occasionally you do. You know, people come up to me and say, "Oh, you turned me vegan at the stall you did like a couple of years ago." I do get that.
I think we've got the check is in the post here, Jeremy, but
yeah, the dollars. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. But then again, you see, this points to some of the things that we've talked about in the past about people really into pressure campaigns and everything, because that gives them the kind of adrenaline hit and all that, doesn't it? About, you know, a victory.
Yes.
But
yes.
Within the vegan movement, apart from somebody else going vegan, maybe that's why people celebrate the new vegan version of ... because that in itself can be constructed as a
I think people do, and I think these things kind of are to be celebrated, but like in terms of turning people vegan, we mostly don't know who we've turned vegan, but like we kind of do know that spreading information about veganism does turn people vegan, because that's how we became vegan. In fact, that's how everyone became vegan, because they received some sort of information promoting veganism in some form or another. So the more of that information we disseminate in all its various forms, you know, it's guaranteed really that more people will become vegan. It's just that we, on an individual basis, we tend not to know about them.
Sam's making a good point here, because we've talked about Jake before, and Jake knows that we've said this, so it's not kind of speaking behind his back or anything.
The other thing I'd say about this is, are they really wins? Are they really wins? You see,
Well, I think it's constructed as a win, but
it's constructed as a win.
As Sam says, Jake kind of says we need to do that, but he also says that he needs those hits.
Yes, and I think, you know, I think it's kind of sort of problematic in a sense that it's not just Jake. I think that, you know, there are quite a lot of other people that come and, you know, they kind of need an enemy to defeat, and then you defeat the enemy, and then that's a win, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of how it's sort of looked at. But you know, if you analyze that at a deeper level, like I said, a lot of these wins aren't kind of really wins. Like if say you close down a place that's supplying animals to laboratories, then if your campaign has done nothing about the number of animal experiments that take place, all that will happen is those animals will be supplied from another supplier. And that one supplier's loss will be another supplier's gain. And it's the same with contract tests. You know, say, you know, we spoke on before the show when we were talking with Wendy. We were talking about the SHAC campaign against Huntington Life Sciences, and in relation to, you know, the reason why anti-vivisection campaigning was in decline for a long time. Now, had that you know, that would have been heralded as a great triumph, you know, had that campaign succeeded in closing Huntington Life Sciences. But would it have been a triumph really? Because that was a contract testing laboratory in that various companies pay that laboratory to test their products for them. No, if that contract testing laboratory was no longer there to test products for a company, they'd have just paid another contract testing laboratory to test their products. So the closure of Huntington Life Sciences, the main beneficiaries of that wouldn't have been other animals; they'd have been the other contract testing laboratories.
Well, I know all that, Ronnie, but your line here is very dangerous, isn't it? Because if you were to say, you know, it's not going to do any good.
My position on those things is rather more nuanced than that, because you see, I'd say that the main aim, if you want to save animals from experimentation, you need to reduce the number of experiments, and I think that campaigns against, you know, like individual targets can have the effect of reducing experimentation in general because of the pressure they exert on the industry. So I would never say, I've never said that, you know, that the SHAC campaign was a total failure, because I think there's a likelihood that it may have had the effect of reducing the number of animal experiments in general, even though its main aim of
no, but I didn't use the phrase total failure. But if you're saying, well, really, the best thing for you to do is do vegan education instead of this, and they're one of those people who need the.
I tend to, what I would do with someone like that is to try to persuade them to include vegan education within their campaign. And we can't see that.
Most of them probably do nowadays.
Right? Yeah. Well, then that's good. I mean, we see that at Camp Beagle. You go to Camp Beagle, you go in there, they got a tent there with information. There's information in there about veganism. I know people who've gone vegan because they've gone to Camp Beagle. They were people that were kind of basically beagle lovers. They went to Camp Beagle because of the animals being, you know, the beagles that were being bred at MBR Acres, you know, for experiments. And they rubbed shoulders with vegans that they got taken the vegan information, and they've become vegan. And some of them have become vegan activists. You see, so it's not, you know, there are positive aspects to those things. I never say that you know, those things were like entirely a waste of time. But I think, you know, just closing down these particular establishments doesn't necessarily, it's not the victory that it might appear to be. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of burnout and what might cause it. So what about strategies to prevent it? And do you think we're very good in this movement of helping people not to experience it? I've got a feeling that we might not be.
Probably not. And I think, you know, one of the reasons is because, you know, not a lot is said about it. And I think this is why it's good that we're talking about this tonight, because I think it's important. And I think that I've said one thing is that don't punish yourself by like constantly exposing yourself to distressing images of other animals being oppressed and exploited. That's one thing. I kind of think that and another thing that kind of I think drives people away is I think there's a lot of toxicity on social media. People getting involved in arguments, and people being unpleasant to one. And instead of having like a kind of friendly discussion regarding a difference of opinion, people become nasty to one another, and of course that's gonna drive people away. Those comments. And so I think it's important to kind of for people not to become involved in that, because that could even if, like, I'd say that even if someone is nasty to you, don't be nasty back.
But that's my strategy, Ronnie. But it doesn't get me anywhere, because I often will respond to somebody's being really rude and disrespectful and all the rest of it, and I respond diplomatically and stuff, and I don't kind of take the bait and all that kind of stuff, and people are calling me names, and I get
But your attitude is what sustains you, because you're not getting emotionally kind of despite what they're saying, you're still staying calm and rational. You see, it's not it's not sort of their reaction that matters. It's kind of how you're reacting, how you're dealing with it. If you see what I mean, you're not allowing yourself to be swept away in this emotional madness, are you? And that's why you're, that's why you've gone on for so long, because of that characteristic about you. And that's what I'd say.
But it's very frustrating when people's immediate response to you is rudeness and stuff. It's very kind of like you're almost like going, you almost like start thinking it's an age thing, kind of, calm down, Sonny, type of thing. And it's a little bit like that in the end. So.
Yeah. But I think those people that are kind of doing the ranting and raving, they're the ones that are actually harming themselves through that, because that's only just going to kind of get them involved in rows, and that's going to affect them psychologically. And in the end, those people are just going to withdraw from things. So,
it's very, it's very hard, because I'm a great proponent of what sociologists would call movement reflexivity, which is people within movements to talk, almost like excuse me, on a kind of tactical level. Did that work? Did this work? What about that strategy? And all this kind of stuff. But having those conversations, especially on social media, are really difficult, because people do tend to fly off the handle, and also people will almost like read the worst into what you're saying sometimes, when you're trying to do it as gently as possible.
Yes, that's right. Or people don't even really read what you've said, but they kind of create like a straw man situation or a straw person situation, don't they? Where they're attacking you for saying something that you didn't actually say, because they've misread what you've said, not bothered to read it properly, or misinterpreted what you said.
Must be something with the heartstrings, and they are not very graphic.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to show people, graphic images to change them at all.
Okay, but let's go back to the fact that we're in a movement, and burnout is a problem for all movements.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, that some of the research about people who stop being vegan it's not really to do with burnout. It's more to do with the fact that they never made it to being vegan. So, but
Yes.
to actually say that within the vegan movement can seem divisive too. Oh, you were never vegan in the first place, which is usually the first thing that people say
Yes.
to vegans, right? And so,
yeah,
but I think that's a separate question a little bit, but it's kind of part of the, the kind of nuances of being in a movement with others. And how can we make it easier for people not to burn out?
Well, I think by kind of giving people a few tips from our own experience about how not to burn out is, I think, kind of helps really, which is sort of kind of what.
And obviously, different personalities and that. Obviously, we know all that, and so
yes.
I suppose all movements are going to experience this. There's nothing you can do completely to eliminate it.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of, there's two, there's the people that kind of cease being vegan or cease or start consuming animal products again, because I think very often, it's to do with the diet rather than anything else when that kind of happens with people. And then there's also really what we're more focused on in this conversation, which is people ceasing to be activists, activists burning out. And I think it's really important for people to look after themselves, because if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be any good as an activist. You're going to become ill, either physically or psychologically, and then you're no longer going to be able to be active, or you'll be less effective as an activist. So I think it's like really important for people to make sure that they kind of eat healthily. I think that people can sometimes become so consumed with activism that they kind of forget about that, the importance of keeping themselves healthy. To eat healthily, make sure they have enough exercise, make sure they get enough sleep. These things are important because, like, people see the horror of the situation in front of them. I've got to throw myself into that. I'm not going to think about myself. I'm going to throw myself into it. And I think there's a situation of there's this idea of not feeling sorry for yourself because of what's happening to the other animals, which I've mentioned already. But I think it's, within all that, it's really important not to neglect your own health and to think this idea of being fit for the fight. You're not going to be any good for the fight unless you keep yourself fit. Unless you try to maintain your own health. And so that's really, I think that's really important. I think some people do neglect that in the kind of frenzy of their kind of, desperation to, immediately do as much as they can.
Weren't you like that, Ronnie?
Was I ever like that?
Yeah. I was.
Yes,
sure.
I think at one time I kind of I was like that, and I think it was, for instance, I used to smoke. If I go back to at the time I was arrested in 1986, when we ended up getting the long prison sentences, I was a smoker. I wasn't a big smoker. Probably smoked about 10 cigarettes a day. I wouldn't say I didn't get any exercise. I didn't get any exercise. I kind of was just totally focused. I was I was doing the press office. I was, dealing with all this stuff from the media. I was helping to put together the supporters group, ALS supporters group newsletter. Like all my time, I lived in this little bed sitter, which was like really sparse. There was basically just a bed in there. I kind of didn't really have any food in there. And I sort of wouldn't even have breakfast. I get up in the morning, I go straight down the road to the office. I had some food in the filing cabinet there. I used to keep some salad stuff. I used to keep carrots and a cauliflower in there.
Under F, was it?
I'd had for my lunch, and then obviously in the evening I'd I'd have a meal. I might make go home and make
You
myself
know,
a meal.
well, Ronnie, I'm a bit like that even now, and because my sister visited me, and she was saying what you should do is not eat after 6, have a big breakfast and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like that. I wake up and I've got movement things in my head already, and then you get on the computer or whatever and everything, and it's quite often I'm looking around and I think it's 4 p.m. I haven't eaten anything yet.
Yeah. It's easy to be like. I mean, I have a big meal late in the evening, because when I eat, especially if it's a fair sized meal, I just want to go to sleep. And so if I was to eat earlier, I just want to go to sleep and I wouldn't get any work done. So I think, well, I'll eat just before I'm due to go to sleep anyway. And so that kind of
we're all told that we're not supposed to do that, aren't we?
They say that, but I haven't really. I've not. I don't think it's done me any harm.
No, I mean, it's bad for hair retention, really.
I've been doing it a hell of a long time then. But other animals, like our cats, they eat food and they go to sleep. Isn't that a natural thing to do? All other animals do that. It's only the human. I mean,
look at Spain and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think it's probably quite natural to have a big meal and then sleep. I'm not very hungry in the morning. I've muesli in the morning for my breakfast, which isn't a huge meal, and then I'll have a snack maybe during the afternoon, and then I'll have. And if I feel a bit hungry, I might have, a few other snacks, and then I have a big meal later at night. I mean, that hasn't always been my eating pattern. It kind of is now.
I'm not quite sure how we got onto this. We're supposed to be talking.
No, we got onto it's just about people eating healthily, like trying to get enough sleep and that. Because once again, that's to do with this being a long haul. We have to keep, we want to be still campaigning, for animal liberation when we're
when we're in our 50s.
When we're like really, when I'm in my 40s in 20 years' time, I still want to be campaigning for animal liberation. But we want to, what's in the best interests of the other animals that we're trying to free. What's in their best interests is for us to be able to carry on as campaigners for as long as possible, not to go mad for a couple of years and then burn out and never be seen again. That's not in their best interest. It's for the best interest.
Well, look, we're coming to the end of our time. Jeremy is waiting in the wings for the next thing, but maybe we could bring him on and see what he makes of this topic. Are you willing to do that? Yeah. What about Jeremy? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Yes, he is. There we go then.
You want me to clear everything up for you, do you? Let me teach the two of you how to not burn out, because I've been around for a whole 8 or 9 years. Let me show you how it's done.
You make sense of everything that we just said, Jeremy.
You can come up. One component is definitely our fellow animals. Every time I start a call, Dexter jumps on my lap, so that's definitely a good recharge source. But happy vegan World Vegan Day, everyone! And I think I definitely resonate with a lot of what's being said. I think I actually have done talks on self-care, even though I've definitely struggled with it myself. And I think it's just analyzing every aspect of our lives, what's positive, what's negative, and what we can maybe do to influence those. And some things are beyond our control.
If you've done talks, how do you do it in a social movement context, self-care? Do you have to have breaks, or do you, if we try to answer the question that we've talked about, not that does it happen, we know that, it's kind of how do you, in a movement sense, stop it happening or minimize it or something?
I think awareness, just like veganism itself, being aware. I know actually what you both were just saying, I resonate with. When I first started, it's right, let's do this. Nothing can stop me. Do whatever it takes, all this stuff. And realizing that actually self-care, it's not just an optional add-on. It's really kind of crucial, and it means something different for all of us. For everyone in the chat, it probably means something different. For me now, I've realized if I get really stuck into something on my computer, it's if it's too many hours, it's let's just go for a walk outside and come back to it, versus, it's a very simple thing, and just that little bit of awareness can go a long way.
I must admit, I'm guilty of not being that tuned into self-care. Sometimes I realize I haven't been out for a couple of days, and I think this is not good. This is not good. But then again, I always think, well, that means that I don't have to walk around with all those speciesists for a while. So,
yeah.
So it depends how you construct it, doesn't it, really, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, my main form of exercise is door dropping, actually. So I'm combining exercise with, you know, spreading the vegan message. I mean, and when I door drop, I walk as fast as possible, so that I'm aware of like it being a form of exercise as well as just, you know, delivering the leaflets. So, you know, you can combine keeping fit with spreading veganism.
It must look a bit suspicious, though. And everybody's got a house kind of camera now. You know,
oh yeah, they've got the little. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and plus I've got a spoon.
Tottles up and
I've got a wooden spoon.
Throws something in your door and then runs away.
I'm coming to their door with a wooden spoon as well because of biting dogs. I push the leaflet through with wooden spoons. So they probably think, "What the fuck's that person coming to my?" They've come to stir up trouble with that spoon. See, it's to stir their conscience, actually. But yeah, so they must think, you know, who's this weirdo with a spoon come to my door, and like they're kind of, because I was delivering some leaflets to a member of our vegan group for her to door drop, and I rang her doorbell. And I got this voice saying, "Oh, can you just put them through the letterbox?" And she wasn't even in the house. She was at work, and she got this thing through to a mobile phone, and was able to see me through the camera, and then speak through a mobile phone, and it came out the thing on the door. Do you know what I mean? It's like. This is where we're at these days. That you kind of
a few more years, you'll have a little robot coming around saying, "Yes, can I help you?" You know,
you get a robot to deliver the leaflets. Then we're back to like just not being fit again, aren't we?
Yeah, not having to do that.
But that's what that's kind of what I do. I mean, you know, during the lockdown, there was a time when we weren't even able to deliver the leaflets, and I just used to go for walks. I used to walk around the local park and stuff like that, you know, kind of trying to make like not every day, probably perhaps 4 days a week, just to, you know, because I was aware that, you know, if I'm just stuck in the house, you know, my fitness is going to deteriorate. But I think it is important. It is important to get exercise. It is important to eat well. It's important to get, and I think it's important to try and like, you know, make our surroundings, you know, comfortable without like lavishing a load of money on it as well. I think it's nice to kind of, you know, sort of be able to kind of come back home to, you know, fairly pleasant surroundings, which I didn't used to do. You know, as I said, that when I was involved with the ALF, I was in this bed sit. It was basically just a bed, and that was it. You know.
Well, you should have got yourself a bed sit in the Panama or whatever it was that Aspie did.
Go out there and get like a you know £100,000 a week bed sitter out there. Yeah, it would need Bitcoin. But I used to kind of I more or less lived in our office when we had the ALF press office. I used to be there like from.
I always wondered what that funny smell was when I visited it.
Yeah, when you went there, that's. Yeah. No, there was a toilet, a separate toilet. I didn't do that in there. But yeah, I'll be there till like 10 o'clock at night doing stuff. And I used to mostly eat at friends' houses in the evening. I used to invite. They probably felt sorry for me, invite me around for a meal and stuff, you know. So I didn't do an awful lot of cooking myself.
Well, Jeremy, it sounds to me like Roger Yates and Ronnie Lee are not very good role models in terms of self-care.
But that said, it works for you. So that goes back to the whole thing. Self-care takes different forms for all of us. We're all different individuals. You know, that's the fundamentals of animal rights, isn't it? Focusing on the individual. You know, it's not just one collective mass do this for self-care. So there's that.
There is that.
I'd say it worked then. It worked then because I was a lot younger. But I wouldn't say that living that way is a model for like, sustaining activism for many years. Of course it's not, because, like I said, I smoked, I didn't get any exercise. And really, funny enough, a lot of that changed when I got put in jail, because of course I got a 10-year sentence. And I kind of thought to myself, well, how can I, if I get myself fit, then, and so that extends my life, then I can win some of those years back. So I saw that as like part of sort of in a sense resisting that sentence I was given. And what I did when I gave up smoking in jail, which is kind of I think a lot of people take up smoking when they go to jail, but I did the opposite. I gave it up. I started to exercise. I remember like doing one run round the football field in this prison I was in when we were allowed out in the field and able to run, and it nearly killed me just once around this field. But like I gradually started exercising, and I used to ended up almost every day running several miles.
Yeah, exactly the same with me. We had a really big pitch. I couldn't get all the way around it, and then in the end we were doing it five laps.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. So I kind of I got myself to a level of fitness which really I haven't really ever lost, because I've always I did used to run when I came out of jail for quite a few years. I used to 3 or 4 days a week I used to go for a run. I don't do that now, but as I said, I do walk briskly, and I've kind of never that kind of fitness that I built up then has never really gone, and I think that's like that's really important. It's really important for us to kind of, because it will help us keep going longer, and that's obviously in the interests of the other animals for us to do that.
Your next live stream could be a walking one. You're both walking.
It could be, delivering the leaflets like to. But I'm not sure you can do that in the States, can you, Jeremy? Or is it more complicated than that?
I haven't done it myself. Actually, I haven't really done street. Well, I've done a little bit of street outreach here, but not. I've mostly been focused on sanctuary work and social media.
Yes.
It would depend. Where I'm living is quite rural, and it's the driveways are quite long. And if you get to the end of it and you don't have a purpose there, you might not be greeted with a smile, if you know what I mean. So
they have the boxes with the flag, and when the male person they put the flag up.
Yeah, if you've got mail to send out and stuff, but I'd say it would depend on the neighborhood. Like the neighborhood I grew up in, the houses close together. I think you could probably do it there, but it's probably situational.
Yes.
Have you been met with any aggression with your door drops ever?
Can't you just wrap the leaflet in a newspaper and chuck it on their lawn?
Chuck it on the lawn. Yeah, that's what they do. They just throw the newspaper, don't they? No, actually, very, very little, very little, if at all. Like someone coming out and saying, "You bloody vegan, I'm gonna," and all that. No, I mean, I remember delivering these little flyers for a vegan festival a few years ago, and we were in Wolverhampton, it was, and we delivered leaflets. This like kind of terraced houses, and we were up the road a bit, and one of the doors down the road opened, and somebody shouted, "I don't want vegan," and they threw the leaflet out into the street.
And he said, "Now I got to give you a leaflet about littering."
I don't want vegan, but we were up the road. We weren't where the person was. They obviously, had gone. We'd kind of moved on, so we didn't have a confrontation with that person. The "I don't want vegan" person. But no, people don't tend to. No, I don't really. I know of some people that have, been involved in arguments with door dropping, but not many. And usually, and I haven't really experienced it myself.
It's completely random, isn't it? Because I would have thought street outreach, I would think you get the most kind of pushback, but I've gotten more pushback like doing chalking and stuff that I thought was quite peaceful. So yeah, it's quite can be quite random. But when people push back, at least we've awoken something in them. Whether that something is going to lead to anything or not is another question. But someone just takes it and doesn't say anything. That's probably less of an impact. I don't know.
Well, I think they'd have to kind of read it a bit to realise what it was about, and by that time you've probably gone up the road, if at all that they're in. I mean, because obviously, it's different. If people are working, they're obviously going to have to, deliver the leaflets when they're not working. But for me, because I'm retired, I do it in the middle of the day, and most people aren't at home, so there's not.
Yeah, come on, Ronnie, give us your cranky people voice.
Love my pirate voice. Is that a pirate voice?
It's that.
That's just been Halloween.
That's a pirate voice. Pirate's voice. A pirate's voice is the same as a farmer's voice, isn't it? Because they're over here anyway in the UK. It's like ooh-ar. That's a farmer, and a pirate is the same. So, we're all pirates once farmers, or did farmers?
Right. Well, I think we're significantly. I think we're sufficiently off topic to close this down now, Ronnie.
But the other thing I'd say, there's a couple of other things regarding
He always does this, Jeremy. Talks bullshit for about 20 minutes, and then I go, "Well, we better go then." He goes,
I know.
Three more points.
One really important thing now, which kind of sort of there's this thing about not expecting kind of too much, really. And I've kind of said that in relation to change. In other words, that we're talking about something long term, and that people come in and think they can do loads and things will change quickly. It doesn't happen, and then they drop out. But I think the other thing is about not expecting too much of other people. In other words, it can be hugely frustrating that like so few other vegans are involved in outreach. Because the vast majority of vegans aren't involved in outreach, actively involved in outreach, and I think that can kind of become very frustrating. And I think it's really important to kind of not dwell too much on that. And what I tend to do is concentrate on what I'm doing rather than on what other people aren't doing. In other words, my attitude is, I'm going to do this. Is anyone going to come and help me do it? But even if you don't, I'm still going to do it. And that's how I look at it. I don't base what I'm going to do on whether other people are going to do it as well or not. And I think that's important, because we dwell too much on this vast number of vegans that don't do anything, and this idea of, well, why should I do it when they're not doing it kind of attitude. Then that can be very sort of I suppose disempowering. That can become very depressing. So don't think about that. Just think about like what you're doing and the impact you're making.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any research on this by now, like Foralytics or something. About on kind of what gets pejoratively called cupcake veganism. Has anybody asked the vast majority of vegans why they don't? In fact, I think there might have been something recently, just ringing a small bell, when they're kind of explaining their lack of activism, and some of it sounds a bit self-serving, like, oh, I don't want to be associated with the extremists and stuff and all that kind of stuff. And
but you see, is that the real reason, or is that the excuse?
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it sounds as though, oh well, it's easy to say that it's not the real reason, But
I kind of think it's to do with people wanting to kind of just be normal and just be ordinary, so to speak. You see what I mean? And it's kind of far easier to be like that as a vegan than it used to be. It's very easy.
You always bring it back to that point, don't you?
Yeah. Because I think it's very, very easy to slot into normal society. These days as a vegan, you can eat out loads of places. You can get stuff similar to what everyone else eats. you know, at the supermarket, can't you? It's kind of, it's much easier to kind of, you know, because you see, like it's kind of, if you ask people how they describe themselves, you know, like if someone asked me how I describe myself, you know, the first words I'd say would be vegan animal liberationist. That's how I describe myself. This is how I've always described myself, right from, you know, like when I first became vegan. But like, you know, sort of back in the day, you know, people that were vegetarian, you know, when, you know, before veganism sort of really took hold, a lot of people who are vegetarian, if you sort of ask them to describe themselves, the word vegetarian wouldn't be the first thing on their list. They'd say, I'm an artist, I'm a mother, I'm a this, I'm that, I'm the other thing, and I'm a vegetarian. It wouldn't be the first thing on the list, you see. And I think kind of veganism has become a bit like that. I think veganism is in some ways the new vegetarianism in that way, that people wouldn't, you know, the word vegan wouldn't be the first thing they'd say if asked to describe themselves. It's just something people happen. Oh, I do all this in my life. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other. Oh yeah, and I happen to be a vegan. It's a bit like that.
What about you?
Maybe
Gary?
because
how would you answer that question? Same as Ronnie?
well, just to that point, I mean, I think a lot of that might be their motivations for living vegan, and I think that's obviously a whole discussion about the vegan for health.
How would you answer it if somebody said, "Who are you? You know, what are you?"
Animal advocate is probably the default. You know, obviously the short and long versions of that, but yeah, I find that works quite well for me. I do think the ethics would need to be at the center of it, because I think there's very, very few advocates of veganism who I'm aware of. That
I'd say the same as what you're saying and what Ronnie's saying, but that might be some key to it. The fact that if you're not comfortable saying it, then there's a major issue. Whereas for us, I think we just say it because it's true, kind of thing.
Well, and that builds off a conversation I was having with Deb in the chat earlier. You know, how do we think we can make the most impact? I Googled it earlier, and the almighty Google said that there's 79 million vegans worldwide. I don't know how they get that number, but I don't know if you two have looked at similar numbers. But out of that, I mean, very few would be proud to kind of proclaim that to their friends, family, and strangers. So I think somehow empowering people to do that, even just wearing a vegan t-shirt, which I know is a topic that's been discussed in the past, but especially being able, like you say, to respond to common conversations. And I think that will improve our self-care too, because you know, if we go into social situations, which I guess we all do on certain levels, you know, if this comes up, what am I going to say? It's much harder to kind of go into them versus, okay, if this is said, this is how I'm going to respond to it. And then you're not only taking care of yourself, you're, you know, becoming an animal advocate versus kind of just removing yourself from the situation, actively trying to oppose it.
It's another complicated one. I seem to have finished the day on complicated issues.
Happy World Vegan Day!
Yeah. I think that's but you see, I think the thing as an activist is it is very frustrating, and I've known some vegans that got very wound up about that, really wound up about the fact that so few other vegans are active.
Yeah, but Ronnie, come on. I mean, like, you know, your entire shtick is that we need vegan education all the time and everywhere.
Yes.
So I would have thought that if anybody's going to get wound up by that, it'd be you.
Well, I think you can. It's a question of not allowing it to get to me. You know, you can say it and you can promote it, but like, you know, not allowing it to get to me, not allowing it to stop me, because people can have this attitude. Well. And I've known people have that attitude. Well, no, you know, no one else is doing this, so why should I put myself out? You know, I've known people have that attitude. You know, and that, and yeah,
I don't even understand that attitude myself.
No, but they do, like, you know, because I think, you know, it can be disheartening when, you know, so few other vegans become involved in things. You know that can be disheartening in the sense that if you kind of allow it to be, instead of focusing, well, I'm, you know, you'd see. So
I think it's two things. I mean, I think there's two separate things. First of all, it is disheartening and then you've got the thing about whether you're going to try not to let it get to you. I mean, I don't think it's. I think it's undeniable that it's very disheartening because
I think
that's exactly what we need, isn't it?
I think it's finding the right way to describe it. How I describe it, it's kind of it's very unfortunate. Perhaps that's not a strong enough word. It's really unfortunate that so few vegans.
It's more tragic. You're looking for.
It's more it's tragic. Yes, tragic. But you see, when you're talking about something being tragic, that's like an objective. That's looking at objectively. When you're talking about something being disheartening, that's about how it's kind of affecting you personally, isn't it? So I would find it more tragic than disheartening because
that's why I said there was those two elements. So you've got the tragedy of so few, and then you've got the thing
tragic,
about how to deal with it. Yeah,
it's tragic, but I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm still going to do what I can, whatever other people do and whatever other people don't do. I'm still gonna kind of carry on and do the thing. It's like I'll do. I mean, locally we've had a big reduction in the number of activists in our group, for various reasons. I mean, simply some people have moved out of the area. That's one explanation for it. People's work and different things.
And you're in it as well.
And because of me, yeah. Quite often I'll do like information stalls just on my own. And it would be good if there were other people would come along and do it. And I do advertise that it's happening.
No, but to me, though, Ronnie, that is tragic because we're a social.
It is tragic. Yeah, that is tragic. But nevertheless, I'll do it. I'll think, well, look, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it in a way that even if no one else comes along, I can still do it on my own. So in some ways, I have to limit what I'm doing because, obviously, if you have more people, you can do more. But that is the current situation. Whether that's going to stay that way, we are getting some, new activists coming along, and hopefully, the numbers will build up again. But I'm still going to do it. I'm not going to not do the stall because I don't think anyone else is going to turn up. I'm going to do it in a way where I know I can do it on my own if I have to.
I've done a lot of solo outreach too, and there's strength to it too because you can be more spontaneous. You can say, "Hey, I've got a free hour. I'm going to pop down there and set up." Or
yeah. Oh, I do that with the door drop-in. I do that. I did that today. I had a sort of hour to spare this afternoon. So I thought, right, I'm going to go out and deliver some leaflets.
So that with your fully loaded wooden spoon.
With my spoon, with my spoon. Well, I got a load of spoons from a cheap shop.
Different sizes for different houses.
Well, they are kind of different sizes, but a bit of a nuisance because there is a kind of ideal size, really, and some are a bit longer than the ideal size. Some are a bit shorter. But I've already had two. I think I got a bag. There's about 10 in this bag. I've already had 2 taken by dogs, where they took the spoon.
It's such a hard life, Ronnie. I mean,
but the thing is, if that hadn't been the spoon they took, it would have been my fingers, wouldn't it?
Well, that would have been worse.
They'd have the spoon, and someone comes home.
I just want to ask people in the chat. When you tuned in today, do you think that you will be hearing Ronnie Lee talking about different lengths of wooden spoons?
Yeah, but I wonder when the people came home from work and found a chewed up wooden spoon in their hallway, what did they think?
Well, they went straight to the cutlery drawer and went. Right, folks. I need to talk to Jeremy, so we're gonna have to wind this up. Have you got a last sentence, Ronnie? I know that's difficult for you and all that, but go on.
I'd say, pay attention to your own well-being, eat healthily, get enough rest, get enough exercise, and don't worry about what other people are doing or not doing, and just keep going. Do what you can, and if you have to keep it simple as long as you're doing something to spread the vegan message.
Well, that sentence was longer than your wooden spoon, so well done. Right, people, thanks a lot. We're going